Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond Product podcast. My name is Moshe Mikanovsky, and I'm your host. Today, we'll continue our series with another startup, which is part of the University of Toronto entrepreneurship community, a network of more than 12 accelerators across the university. My guests today are Steve Joordens, co-founder and CEO, and Brian Harrington, co-founder and chief research officer of startup TalkLab, creator of Parallels, an application that allows one to quickly create cognitive agentic conversational AI agents with rich conversational abilities and the potential to simulate emotional states that change appropriately as a function of how they're being spoken to. Both Steve and Brian join us from the University of Toronto, Scarborough. Steve is professor in the psychology department, where his primary areas of expertise are in the design, creation, and research assessment of educational technologies. And Brian is a professor in the Department of Computer and Mathematical Sciences, where his primary research is in computer science education and ethics of technology. In addition to co-founding TalkLab, Steve is also the director of Advanced Learning Technologies Lab of U of T. Okay, welcome to the podcast, Steve and Brian.
Great to be with you, Moshe.
Good to see you.
Absolutely, and thank you for joining us today. As I mentioned in the introduction, you both are coming from University of Toronto, Scarborough. Both of you with many years of education experience in psychology and computer science. Tell us, before we dive into what TalkLab and Parallels is, tell us a bit about your background and how did you get to where you are right now?
Okay, well, I guess I'll start because I have a few more years on Brian. So I've always been intrigued by both computer science and psychology. My undergraduate, I was kind of working in both. Ultimately, psychology kind of won the show for me. So I really fell in love with psychology and went on to do a lot of research in that area. But when I started to teach again, I loved to teach very large classes, which is just a trait I have. But I also want to teach them well. And I realized at some point that really, in order to do good, high impact teaching practices at scale, you have to embrace technology. So I'd kind of gone back to my computer science roots or whatever, I think early on, and just in the sense of trying to figure out how we could harness technologies to enhance the whole learning experience students had. So I had a little bit of experience of that before, but now in this age of AI and getting to know my friend Brian here better, we've really taken it to another level, I think, that I'm really proud of and excited by.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I guess from my point of view, the story I like to tell is that I've taught for a long time. Again, big courses, small courses. But one of the things that really blew me away was a student in particular, where they came on online messaging forum and said, I overslept, I missed my exam, I don't know what to do. And I'd messaged them and said, come and see me in person and we'll sort it out. And they didn't do anything. They didn't show up. And then I messaged them back and said, hey, come and see me in person and we can sort this out. I don't really want to put in writing that we can break the rules or bend the rules a bit for you. And then eventually at the end of the semester, they failed the course. And I messaged them and said, what's going on here? And they said, I couldn't bring myself. It was too scary to come and talk to you.
Wow.
And that was the thing that really made me realize that this, social anxiety around talking to another human being it's not just, oh, these kids are having trouble. It's these students. It is really detrimental to their lives. And that was what Steve and I started with, this idea of getting people talking to each other.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm teaching as well in a different university, so not at U of T, but a different university in the city. And I don't have as many years experience as you do, but it's really interesting to see that, because that was also something that I didn't realize I will face. And I do sometimes face that. And it's also interesting how, Steve, you came from psychology perspective into technology, and Brian, you came from technology into psychology perspective, and you kind of met in between. So tell me a bit about what what did you build, and how long have you been working on that? And I think you've done it as also part of your academic research
Yeah.
as well. So it's not just to help your students, but to help many others.
Yeah. So it started out largely as a research collaboration that was going on with Brian, myself. We'll mention Rob, who does a lot of the technical work. And at that point, there was a postdoc named Adam, who also contributed a lot to what we were doing. And we were really trying to face this challenge of social anxiety. We had this idea we could create a platform where we could help students get the knowledge they need. Like, what are strategies you can use? What are whatever. But we also know that to really be impactful, they need to practice those things. And if they can't speak to one another, how are they going to get the critical practice? And so that was our core challenge early on. And that's really where we came to conversational AI as an opportunity to give them someone to talk to that didn't scare them as much as Brian scares people. Um, Not necessarily just Brian, but really, they're scared of one another as well. And so how can we, teach them something about like active listening or various other strategies, but then say, okay, now go try it. And so that set us on the process of trying to create AI conversation partners that felt really lifelike. And we started to play with the dynamics of the conversation and also play with the emotionality in the conversation, which arrived us at a place where we felt like we'd created really nice conversational partners. And originally that was the focus, was social anxiety and trying to break that down. I don't know if you want to add a bit to that, Brian.
Yeah, so this again, I like to sort of tell the story versions of it. That Steve and I have been talking a lot about these students having real anxiety, fear of negative evaluation, all these problems, and Steve was saying we have all of these wonderful research-backed methodologies that help students learn to get better at this. They just need to get in a room with other people and practice, and it helps break the fear of negative evaluation. But they don't really want to, and we have trouble getting signups. And I remember my reaction is, yeah, if you told me you found a cure for arachnophobia, it's just bathing in spiders, it wouldn't surprise me that people don't show up. So you need to get something that's easier to access and they're not afraid to talk to. But then the interesting thing to me came that these agents, if you just use the plain large language models, they're too again, I like the term sycophantic. We say helpful AI mode, but they're sort of too obsequious. They don't challenge you. They don't push back. They don't feel like you're talking to a person. They feel like you're talking to a bot. So we were solving the challenge in terms of making it feel more realistic as a conversation partner, and sort of accidentally stumbled on, oh, well, this has a lot bigger applications than just for practice conversation.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a second. I'm really curious also about the persona of users, because I'm sure that some students are fine. They are outspoken, they're
Yeah.
extrovert, they will not have the issues that you're explaining. So it's not every student.
Right.
And this is more for those that do have maybe anxiety speaking out loud or in a group
Yeah.
or things like that. And they probably brought it with them from high school, because I'm sure that it didn't start when they joined
No,
university.
absolutely. In fact, they brought it with them from when they were about 13 years old, which is when the average kid gets their phone. Actually, I don't even think that's an average. Average is probably 8 or 9 now. I don't, it keeps creeping down.
Yes.
But from about 12 or 13, they start communicating with each other primarily through asynchronous communication means, text messages, chats, etc.
Right.
That gives them
Right.
all the time in the world to think about what they want to say, to, dare I say, ruminate over what they want to say. You say that to a young person, they will tend to nod their head just like you're doing right now. Like, yes, I ruminate over every text message I send. And then they ruminate over the text message that comes back to them. And that's how they've been. And they've done that for 5 years. That has been their predominant form. We know face-to-face conversations are down by 70% from just a decade ago. And so really the problem is a lack of practice, bad habits from texting, but also that pure lack of practice. And they come into our classroom and now suddenly face-to-face becomes important. Working in teams becomes important. Giving presentations becomes important. And now they have to deal with it. And you're right, it's not everybody, but we measure social anxiety in my class, and over half of them are beyond the clinical cutoff for social anxiety. So there's
Wow.
some that are doing fine, some that are doing well, but there's a lot that are not.
And do you see over time, as the years going by, you actually see the decline in those abilities?
That's kind of interesting. I only teach first year psychology mostly. I haven't measured the social anxiety across
Oh,
the,
I see, I
the
see. No, I'm
lifespan of
saying
students. Interesting.
like throughout the years that you're teaching, in the last how long is it? 30 years that you're teaching. You're
Ah,
seeing that
oh yes.
that new students coming in, and they have more and more of that issue.
Yes, absolutely. And the
Mhm.
pandemic just made, I think, a trend, an ongoing trend worse because they spent, so much time isolated and separated, then developed bad
Yeah.
habits on top. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I've also used or tried the other day. I tried VAPI, VAPI, or
Mhm.
voice APIs, and
Mhm.
I was like trying it while my daughter and my wife, uh, sorry, while my daughter and my wife were around, and it was a very funny interaction.
Yeah.
But I mean, what you just said about the specific emotional things that might happen, and also
Yeah.
the responses are not just trying to please you, because that's what he tried. He tried to please me like any other
Yeah.
LLM
Yeah.
that you would interact with.
Yeah.
How that I'm sure this is your unique value proposition there, but how does that work exactly? I'm really curious.
How does the stripping away work? Do you want to speak to that a little bit, Brian?
Yeah. So, interestingly, again, that was one of our very first things we sort of started to work towards is
Mhm.
how do you, not just how do you make these things not sycophantic, how do you make them not obsequious, but how do you maintain that? That was a big thing that we found fairly early on is it's fairly easy to set it up and say, I'm going to add to my prompt, be confrontational, push back, question me. But throughout a conversation, they naturally move back towards this helpful AI mode. It's just their natural state.
Mm.
And so we put this idea of throughout the conversation, it's constantly getting feedback from an emotional regulation system that is sort of, instead of it saying you're sending text to a large language model and it's producing a result, it's almost like every piece of information coming in, you have that little voice at the back of your brain that says, okay, the user just said this. How does that make you feel? How does that change your mental state? Then you come up with the information. Now, how does that mental state affect how you're going to respond? So I
Mm.
think that was a big sort of element that makes it feel a little bit more natural, but maintain that character that you've created.
I see.
Yeah,
I
in
see.
psychology, there's this interesting debate. And it's not really debate, we know, but there was the original notion of a blank slate. We're born a blank slate, and then experience creates us who we are.
Right.
Versus the role of genetics or something. I feel sometimes with us, we tried to get rid of the role of genetics, where the genetics was that helpful assistant, try to kind of turn it into a blank slate, and then we can
Mm.
overlay a personality on that sticks, that feels real, that does things like tells jokes and asks you questions, doesn't just, wait for you to ask it questions. So it can actually engage in real conversation, two-way conversational flow.
Mm.
And it can even simulate emotional states in some cases if you ever want it to, you can titrate. Is this an easy person to talk to, or is this a difficult person to talk to? And so as people are going through conversational training, you can actually titrate the sort of challenge that they're facing, and where they're succeeding, where they can use more support, etc.
Right. So how would it work if I am a student and I'm coming to, or not a student, anyone with,
Yeah.
I want to improve the way that I'm talking with other people. I would come to Parallels and I would tell it what is my challenge, or I would tell it who am I trying to speak with.
So now we got to give you a little bit more of the story, because we kind of went another direction at some point, and we got to get back to more of that direction. So our notion of TalkLab, the first idea, is close to what you said, almost like we almost imagine a Duolingo kind of thing,
Mm.
where you can have these little challenges where you interact with different things, and it could be anything from you're a reporter and you're trying to get information out of somebody, so use your active listening skills to try to draw as much information as possible. It could be that
Hmm.
you're doing improv with this AI, so try to work with them in a conversation thing to get improv. So we imagine all these little games that you can gamify, But something really kind of important happened at some point, which is my postdoc at the time created somebody called Virtual Steve. So a virtual version of me
Yeah.
to release to a class. And the conception there was, okay, maybe TalkLab will work with sort of contrived little games and stuff we give them. And I still think we want to get back to really building that out as we imagined. But here was something we knew they would use because they want to do good on exams. And the virtual Steve will answer their questions 24 hours a day. It will ask them questions about what they've learned to see if they've learned things well. And it provides all sorts of support for I teach a very large class. Normally getting access to me is hard, but getting access to this thing, it can talk to 20 people at a time. And so we saw students embracing it, and we kind of started to think, well, maybe the better approach, maybe better than having a little tool, and it shouldn't be either or, but maybe better than having the TalkLab tool we imagined is to try to really, in all facets, or as many facets of education as we can, bring in conversational AIs to give them that conversational practice. So you want support with your exam, no problem, but you have to talk to this guy. He doesn't text. He only talks. And we can imagine, we're currently imagining how we could have an AI in a teamwork context that could help them negotiate teamwork. But again, conversational AI. We're imagining in the assessment part of learning, which is really where our true excitement is, that we could get back to oral assessments of learning, where you go through a learning thing and now you have an AI that assesses how much you actually learned and assesses skills, perhaps in addition to knowledge, much more holistic form of assessment, potentially a much more equitable form of assessment. And so we're starting to get this notion of, can we weave this in all these different places? And so just by fiat of being a student, the students are continually encountering these bots, talking to them, and getting a little bit more comfortable. Now, I still think we want to get that TalkLab out there as well, that sort of game-based idea out there as well, and kind of come at them from multiple sides.
Right. No, that's really interesting there. I can think about many other usages for that, and I think that's exactly where you are at, right?
Yeah.
Where there is maybe many ideas of where it can apply the technology. So what's the direction right now? Where are you right now with Parallels?
So I think actually we've been talking about this, and one of the things that the incubators and all these things try to tell you is pick your vertical, figure out where your market is, figure out what your thing you're going to focus on. And we've realized that like there's too many. We have too many options. And it's a good problem to have, right? That there are constantly people coming. We've been approached by the Toronto Zoo, wanted a virtual zookeeper. We've got de-escalation training from police. We've got St. Michael's Hospital wants help training nurses. We've got, all sorts of training experiences, all sorts of university experiences. And so we sort of envision ourselves now, as Steve likes to say, instead of picking a vertical, we're a horizontal. And that instead of us being okay, this is going to be our business that we are going to go into, we think of TalkLab more as a service provider that says anyone who wants better conversational AIs, we can help you with that. So instead of us narrowing our focus to one area, we're saying we're sort of part of every area, because I think conversational AI is the way of the future, and everyone's going to want to be part of this system, and we can be the people who help them make it better.
Yeah,
I can give one interesting example of just sort of our day-to-day lives now, because it really is amazing how everywhere we go and people hear about this, suddenly a use case pops out. And one of them was one of my students who's there's a member of parliament in Canada that I guess he's part of their youth group or something. He's connected with this member of parliament, and this member of parliament said, hey, I wouldn't mind having a virtual version of me out there that can answer anybody's questions about my policies, my positions on various things, and is always available. And then as we were starting to think about that, we said, well, you realize it can do more than answer questions. It can listen. It can talk to your constituents. It can find out what's on their minds. It can do it at a scale you can't possibly do. And we could then summarize that data back to you, and you could have a real close connection with your constituents that can really help guide, your decision-making and stuff. Now that's something that just wasn't even imaginable almost pre-AI. And then you run into this use case, and then suddenly it's like, oh, now members of parliament. So it can go from the zoo to members of parliament in a single day and just be a normal day for us.
Well, in product, we definitely have those products that are using technology in the back end and create
Yeah.
some value to the users at the front end. Or we have enabler products that are enabling many, many other products with their technology.
Yes.
Now, in voice, there are, I mentioned before, VAPI, and it's quite generic, and
Yeah.
it is a technology. It's all APIs. But what I see, and we mentioned it before, is your unique value there about the emotional state and being able to not just talk with you, because there are others that can talk with you already, but really understand where you are and have that person in the back of your mind or in the backs of the AI telling it what state to be in. So I would think that there is more than just like someone talking with a zookeeper or someone talking with a member of parliament,
Yeah.
but there is situational challenges that sometimes are very hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Like I can think about if I want to speak with, I have like, I don't know, a traffic offense and I want to go to court to defend it. I might
Yeah.
have anxiety to speak there in front of the judge, and maybe that will help me get prepared for that.
Yeah. Yeah. You could have a virtual judge that you go to and practice. Yeah. I
so,
mean,
so mhm,
I'll
yeah,
just mention one part of that because yes, it's the emotional system, but I think it's also we paid a lot of attention to what we might call conversational flow, or what we're more calling now cognitive agency. So we thought talk about agentic AIs, and agentic AIs, you usually think they can reach out and touch something, they can book your Airbnb, or they can do
yes,
something like that, and we call that now
yes,
behavioral agency. We're thinking more cognitive agency so that we can have, for example, the
mm,
Zookeeper app. The goal of that Zookeeper app is to try to transmit as much information about the zoo and the otters as possible. They see it as an educational opportunity,
right,
and that opportunity we realized is maximized through a real two-way conversation. Originally, we kind of had it as a QA, but then the user and Brian kind of made this point that puts a lot of effort on the user to keep coming up with questions all the time, and
mm,
so we would find it
mm,
would do a question or two and then stop. But if we instead made the AI ask some questions back of the user and we made it more of a two-way dialogue, suddenly these conversations went a lot longer. And the goal
uh,
of the conversation, which was to exchange a bunch of information, was
yes,
reached at a much higher level. So that's the
yeah,
sort of, that's what we want to create, are these really engaging, dynamic kinds of back and forth that can reach certain and different goals. In assessment of learning, you don't want the student, it in that case, the agent has control of the conversation. The student's answering the questions. And so we've
mm,
kind of played with that whole dynamic. And
yeah.
we've come up, I think, with some really good underlying principles for what makes different dynamics come to life and work well.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense because now that I'm thinking about it, I visited the zoo a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
or maybe a few months ago in the summer, in the end of the summer with my family,
Hmm.
and we did interacted over there with one of the volunteers that were teaching
Yep.
different things, and he was very keen to teach us about poop of all things of different animals, which was really interesting. But
Interesting.
we had questions, but he was really like, "Do you want to learn about this? Or do you want to learn about that?"
Yeah.
So I feel that that what you just described about the ability to almost behave like a human counterpart
Yep.
that assess how you are and is sensitive to how you react to it, and then come up with more details or less details if you're not interested. That's really interesting because my next question is a bit more about nonverbal cues.
Mm.
How do you deal with that?
So I can take this. At the moment, we are mostly just dealing with text. It is we are focusing on having just the straight translation,
Mm,
largely because it does fairly well in that context, but partially because it's a tricky problem, right? For example, the zoo is a great use case because you get people with all sorts of accents, all sorts of walks of life. They are in a physical environment. It's not here where I've got a quiet room with a microphone in front of me. You're in a noisy area of the
right,
zoo.
right.
And so it's already a lot to just get the raw information out.
Yes.
There is a lot more in the very simple nonverbal cues. One of the very simple examples is we have the agents. It's it has a little picture on the screen, and we realize that just having it kind of change its motion, having like a little thing when it's going like this, or doing things while it's conversing, it gives that little bit of feedback that helps.
Mm. Hmm.
And we do a little bit in terms of trying to modulate the voices and stuff, but that is a whole fantastic area that has yet to be explored. And we're sort of excited that, like, well, we're already doing pretty well with just the baseline. This is only going to get better as we add more
Right.
elements.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's certainly, we can imagine, and everyone can imagine, like a VR version where you really have a nice lifelike, rendering of the person, and that they have really good nonverbals coming at you. The thing with the nonverbals is you want to get them right. Like if you're going to get to the precise stuff and you're going to get people comfortable, nonverbals come from our limbic system. It's a very primitive, it's not so much computer code. Computer code does really well for frontal lobe stuff, logical, rational kind of things. This has
Yeah.
to be just sort of expressed as a function of the emotion that that agent is feeling. So we've got the first step. We can tell you what emotional state that agent is in at any time. And I think as we
Mm.
get better at mapping that onto, say, facial musculature and stuff like this, we can ultimately present something that's really good in terms of helping to train people to understand nonverbals. Because when we say
Mm.
the young people don't have practice with real time, that's what they're kind of missing. And that's why they
That's part
feel
of it.
sometimes the confusion is like, if they're talking to me and I'm like this, am I just thinking deeply about what they're saying? Or am I
Yeah.
thinking negatively about what they're saying? Do they see this
Mm.
crease and think, oh, yeah, it's not, and they're not really sure. And you get that with
Wow.
more experience, right? So I think we
Wow.
need to go there. We're at an early step, a really good step, but
Yeah.
that's the direction the future leads for sure.
Wow. I'm already seeing my chat tonight at dinner with my kids because they are from that generation. They are already like two of them already finished university, so they're not
Mhm.
there specifically with that problem, but they're from the generation that they had phones since
Yeah,
you know uh, whenever.
yeah.
But that's really interesting. I never thought about that actually. So now that you're saying that, it makes so much sense. Um, but I'm really excited to hear more about how you develop it into the future, also with those additional cues. And like any other thing, the same way that Brian, you mentioned accents, also nonverbal cues are different across cultures, so that just adding more complexity to it.
Yeah.
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 One other
Amazing.
sorry, one other thing that I think this is important in this conversation, bringing up, is we try as much as possible to be technology agnostic. So, we use certain large language models to do certain things. We use certain voice capture technologies to do certain things, certain voice synthesis things. But for the most part, we try very hard to not tie ourselves to any one technology, right? If
Mm.
tomorrow, OpenAI's system is better than Google's system, we can fairly easily flip to something else. If
Mm.
tomorrow, 11 Labs does a better than LiveKit or something like that, we can just swap to that system.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the big problems that people run into in these AI startups is they tie themselves to a specific point, which is the best point when they start. But this is evolving so quickly that you just get left behind. We sort of
Yeah.
view it as, look, these waves are going to keep coming. Instead of fighting the waves, let's ride those waves. So
Yeah.
as these technologies get better at, being able to adapt and being able to synthesize and being able to understand, we just get the benefit of that rather than trying to fight against it.
Right. Right. That's great. It does remind me of past years when I was on the engineering end of things and I tied myself up with specific technology, unrelated to this completely, but
Yeah.
I got myself into the same conundrum when that technology was in some trouble and I had to replace it very, very quickly with something else. I learned my lesson back then. So I'm really happy to hear that. Um, Great. What is like one founder tip that you might want to share with our audience as a founder?
Wow. Ideas are cheap. Bringing them to life is hard. I've learned this before, but a lot of people, a lot of the young people, especially too, have these dreams of get rich quick or whatnot, and starting a startup is often on their list. I think it should be. I think there's so much to learn from just going through the startup process. But I think it's also like a lot of work. You may escape having a boss. You may become your own boss, but you may suddenly find you're a really tough boss that insists that you work 60 or 70 or 80 hours a week to make your dream come true. So you got to love what you do. And I think this is something that Brian and I think about. We talk about these horizontal, and we think our work can apply in many different situations. The ones that are really, most important to us are education, healthcare, first responder sort of applications where we feel like we can have some social good. And I think when you can do that as a founder, when it cannot just be about chasing the get rich, but when it can be about, hey, we can have a real positive impact on the world, that's going to keep you going longer than the keep you rich will, I think. And so I think that's always a very important thing. And not that we would ever turn away any good business opportunity, but those are the ones that we're really more proactively seeking out.
Yeah, great.
I would say for mine, on one hand, don't do what we did, which is have, 3 people who have full-time, very busy jobs and then try to layer a startup on top of it. Because there's just lots of times when, we've said like, man, if we could spend, 40, 50 hours a week building this, we could go wild. But I've got my exam coming up that I have to prepare. I've got, Steve's got his 1,700 students have a midterm that he needs to be ready for. And we just, we have to be able to do that. But on the flip side of that is, I think, do what we do if you can, which is we're doing this because we want to build something cool and interesting, and the business flows out of that, as opposed to, we didn't sit down and say, hey, let's start a business. What business can we start?
Right.
And a lot of the advice is around that. Whereas we started with, let's build something that we want to exist in the world. Yeah. And if we build something that we all passionately believe this will be good for the world, A, I'm sure other people are going to want it, and B, we're going to enjoy the process, as opposed to this is a chore we have to go through to make this thing happen.
Yeah, and you have seen the problem firsthand, and you're trying to help the people that you're seeing the problem, that they are your clients anyway. They are your users right now as students. Yeah. Even if it expands beyond the students and the school, it's still, very similar problems that people are having. So it is.
And if I may say too, I think we see it a little differently than a problem in the following sense. What we saw in education, and I think Brian and I can both say that, for many years, even before AI, we've been trying to figure out ways to make education better. Brian's been pushing for things like mastery approaches to assessment that are generally known to be much better. I'm in the peer assessment thing. And pre-AI, it was a very difficult thing to do. The traditional, good ship education was a big, heavy ship that you couldn't move very much. AI in education, but I think more generally, is really causing a paradigm shift. Suddenly people are saying, okay, how else can we do things? What is the potential? Where does that get us that it doesn't? And so, yes, there's certainly a problem. AI has caused a lot of problems, but we're not so much trying to solve the problems that AI has caused as we're looking for the opportunities that it presents to really reimagine what we do. And I think that makes it fun for us. That makes it, a nice creative enterprise. But that's the part I think that others, when I gave a TEDx talk on this, and when I give talks about what we're doing, they see this and they go, okay, maybe this isn't an educational context that I work in, but we want to reimagine how we're doing everything as well. And this idea of AI as a workforce multiplier, you can it's like you're adding people that weren't there before. You're not subtracting anybody, and you're able to do things that just were considered impossible before. You tell that story and they see it and they become intrigued. And I think that's when we've started to see that the sort of approach we're using is affecting everybody. Every business is being impacted by AI and looking to, is this going to destroy us, or is there in fact an opportunity to really rebuild into something great? And we like to be part of that rebuild part.
Yeah, I think that's on everyone's lips these days for sure. Okay, so now I want to move to our next section in the podcast, and this is the section where we do a little workshop We'll see what happens there with
Okay.
any specific product challenge that you might have. And I know the one you wanted to talk about, you touched a bit on it before. So tell me what it is.
Well, I mean, Brian was saying when we were doing our business building and we were going through this process, you try to do it in the typical way. And the typical first thing is you have to figure out what your vertical is. And so you think of all of the places where maybe your product could have relevance. And then you do these discovery interviews where you start talking to people within each of those spaces without any mention of what you're doing, just trying to understand, what is their reality? What are the challenges they deal with? And we started doing that, and we started realizing two things. That one, the people we were talking to didn't seem to be the people we should be talking to. We were, it just felt like we were learning about problems for people who weren't imagining AI solutions. And then at some point, we sort of ran into the people in any organization that were worried about the AI. Who got tapped in this organization and says, "You, Moshe, I want you to figure out how we can use AI well." Those people have, a lot of responsibility. A lot of the ROI on AI has not been really good yet in a lot of these sectors. And so those are our people. Like, we are the ones that are trying to reinvent education. We find when we talk to those people, it's a common language. And so those people literally are sort of horizontally arranged. Every entity has a layer of these people. And as we came to that, two things happened. One, it just felt like we were talking to the right people. And two, it felt like us. It felt like we could do what we did, that we didn't have to just to sort of be a full B2C. Like, it felt like if you're talking to the wrong person, it's like, are we going to set up a company that does whatever? But no, when it was more the right person level, it felt good. So that was a challenge. It's a funny challenge because you're going against almost everyone who advises you. And when, assuming you're going to go up and pitch, you're not doing a conventional pitch that the investors are used to. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I think the novelty kind of gets their attention, but then you better be able to deliver on that novelty, or they're going to be like, yeah, you can't possibly pull that off.
Yeah. So what's the specific thing you wanted to discuss in that area?
So I would say, just to sort of synthesize that a little bit, our problem, I think, is the reverse problem of what a lot of startups have. Like Steve was saying, that you keep advice, find your vertical, figure out all the people in your vertical, do these assessments and discovery interviews. Our problem at the moment is, I like to use the analogy of spinning plates, like the old school performer who has, and at a certain point, once one plate starts to wobble, you go to speed it up, you've got another plate wobbling. And we were just talking today about some new opportunities keep coming in, and I have to keep going, spinning plates. We have too many things. We have to make a decision about which organizations, which groups, which projects are worth spending our time and energy on, because we're very limited in the capacity we have. As we say, we're not full time at this.
Right.
How do we have a good framework for deciding, okay, this is worth investing in versus, and not financially, right? I don't think it's necessarily they're going to give us money, but it's going to be, this is going to be something that is worth spending our time because it will help us develop the business and the product and the ideas and everything, versus this one, which would be a neat, fun project to work on, but won't really help forward us. So I think that's what we'd be interested in, is how do we do that?
Amazing. That's a great question.
Sorry. I play the role of plate collector, and Brian's like, stop with the plate.
As long as they don't break, right? That's a great question. And the advice that most of those advisors and VCs are giving, it's a solid advice. What they do forget sometimes is that there are different type of businesses and different type of strategies.
Yeah.
And I mentioned before, when we touched on that before in the discussion, about what type of organization you are actually building and what type of technology you're building and who are your clients. So at the end of the day, you could decide to be a technology enabler rather than we are building all the end front application for everyone. You can definitely be very successful at building a layer, like many organizations are building that all over the world. And They're still very, very successful. Some of them are not known, but they're huge organizations. Some of them are very known, depends what they're doing.
Yeah.
So cybersecurity, for example, usually it's not a product that sits in the front end and
Yeah.
the users are using it. It is a
Yeah.
back end layer that enables others to do things. And there are many other examples like that.
Yeah.
So what I would do, I would usually start with, what is our vision in the world? What do we do envision
Mm-hmm.
that something is going to happen and we will change in the world in 5 years, in 10 years, whatever, big vision you're putting in there.
Yep.
And then what would be the strategy to get there? How are we going to get to that place? So let's say that your vision is to enable emotional based and psychological based interactions, oral interactions with any type of for any type of product
Yep.
out there. Maybe there will be competition, but maybe you will take 50% of the market or 80% of the market, whatever that is.
Yep.
Then how are you going to get there? Through
Yep.
what channels you're going to get to that place.
Yep.
Now, let's say you already have the technology in place and you can find different partners to sell to. So
Exactly.
your clients, it will be a B2B2C
Right.
in a way,
Right.
because your clients will be those organizations that are building their product and you will be their enabler for this layer.
Yep.
And then their users will be using it.
Yeah.
Which of those opportunities that you have could actually get you to that place that you're trying to get? So whether it is the size of their sector, because then it will be about their sectors, not much
Yep.
about yours.
Yep.
So what is the
Absolutely.
size of their sectors? What is the problem they're solving? What is their size already of their product at the moment? Because many
Yep.
of them already will have a product, and then we'll want to add it on top of their product to
Yep.
enable more functionalities or more needs. So if one of them has already, I don't know, 100,000 users versus another one just have 100, depends, what type of users, of course,
Yep.
depends who they are. But in general, I'm just throwing numbers here. It doesn't mean much. You still have to do the comparisons between all of them and what your assumption and hypothesis is going to be about how they can get you to the vision you're trying to get.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly the way we think in a lot of these areas. Like I'll give you one example, the first responder example, where we would really like to have a positive impact on the training of first responders for many good reasons. There are large companies. I could name a few, Axon, Niche, a couple of others that are big first responder training provision companies that already have really deep roots in the Canadian first responder community, and to be able to go to them in a B2B way and say, hey, we can help you up your game, or maybe even by working with a little bit of the Toronto Police Services, who are one of their customers, and then saying to the Toronto Police Services, hey, how could you kick up to them how much our functionality could add to their products, and use them as a sort of gateway to get to the mothership, I guess you'd say. But that's what we would love to do, and let them focus on the customer service, the customer interactions, the things they're already great at. Let us focus on just product development, and really, that's our ultimate goal, is that the core team, Brian, myself, and Rob, we can largely focus on just making this the best product possible, and that other members of our team help. And a lot of that, I mean, Brian refers to it as the hub and spoke. So we're the hub, and then we need the spokes that sort of bring what we're doing to different horizontals. Boys, we got a lot of terms we're starting to throw around here. But that's how things seem to be feeling, and it seems organic. One of the first things when we started looking at pitch decks, you can go to videos of people saying, here's the 15 slides you need, the 12 slides you need, 10 slides, whatever it may be. We went to one person who said, the first thing you got to get right is the narrative. What's the story you're telling? And that narrative has to be authentic. It has to feel good to you. And if you're twisting into some other thing because this pitch deck thinks it should be that way, that's a mistake. And so it was really refreshing to hear his point of view. It allowed us to kind of escape some of the traditional ways of thinking about things and find that one that feels authentic, feels right, feels like where we can have the impact we would like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, authenticity is definitely an important part of it, and showing the value to them, whatever value you're trying to create to them,
Yeah.
showing them that value. Another strategy that came to mind was maybe to open it up to developers, so and
Mhm.
enable other developers to build their own solution based on your technology, and this way they can try things for you and come up with other ideas, and maybe it will be from other organizations, not just individual developers sitting from home and doing whatever, but it could become from enterprises and other software providers that are looking for things like that, and they may be looking for, okay, you solved that exact problem I was looking for. Let's just use that technology. Now,
Mhm.
hub and spoke is an interesting analogy there. Just we always try to see ourselves as the center of the world, so we're in the center and everyone is there for us. But at the end of the day, if your vision is to make it an enabler for other organizations, they're of course they will see themselves as a center, and also users will not even know. It will be transparent to them, and
Right.
that's the beauty of this,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
people are putting together solutions that are build up from many different technologies, but to the end user, if it's built right and if it's a right fit, it could be magic, and they won't know that there is so much in there, and it's a win-win for everyone at the end of the day. Great. Anything else on this, or should we move to our last section?
I'm good.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, good. So in our last section, this is the rapid questions that we ask everyone, the same questions. So I'm going to ask you, and I want answers from both of you. So you choose who want to answer first, etc. But let's go. Uh, one of the questions you will see is sounds very silly these days, but I still like to ask it. So the first question is, what is your biggest inspiration?
Okay. I think my biggest inspiration is, it sounds corny, but it's the students. That's where I come from. I see the students experience this and what their challenges are and what they're good at and what they're struggling with. Sorry, dogs are barking in the background.
No worries, we love dogs.
We'll try that again. It sounds corny.
It's all good. It's all good, Brian.
You
It's
want
Steve,
real.
you
Steve to
answer.
go and then
I'll
okay,
go
let
first, and
Steve
then
go.
Brian will go, and
Sure,
I'll leave the students for him. Um,
go for it.
so there's this little canned phrase I'm starting to say, which sounds a little cutesy, but I actually love it a lot. I'm coming near the end of my retirement, or coming near the end of my approaching retirement, and you start to think of what would you like to accomplish, and the one thing I would like to accomplish is I would like to be the one that helps put the end date on the tombstone of multiple choice testing. So I've never, from the time I was a student myself, I've never liked multiple choice testing. As I come to understand assessment better, I know how bad it is as a way of assessing learning. And I now see the potential in AI of bringing back proper assessment of learning at scale using AI and just putting multiple choice tests to bed forever. So that's my
So wait,
that's my inspiration.
your biggest inspiration is multiple choice assessments, or your biggest inspiration is the inspiration to
Bury them.
eradicate them?
Yeah, which sounds like a sort of negative form of motivation, but it is. So I think Brian has a much more positive form of motivation. Well,
Go for it, Brian.
I'll restart. The dogs are gonna.
Yeah.
So it might sound corny, but honestly, my biggest inspiration is the students, because I see them struggling with this stuff, with having conversations. I talk to a lot of students, and I see what they're excited about, what they're worried about, where they're struggling, where they're succeeding. And that's been a great source because I get a very narrow window onto this development. Instead, I have now thousands of students where I can say, what do they see coming in the future and what are they interested in?
Hmm. Great, great. Core value.
hmm. I think we really do want to have positive impact. You hear so much about AI and the potential negatives, and there absolutely are. And we're very happy that there are people worrying about all these things, thinking about them. But at the same time, the flip side is, okay, if it exists and it's out there, let's find these positive uses where we can hopefully positively impact society by it. So I think that's sort of a core value of what we have. How can we look to the opportunity side of AI and make sure we're not missing out on opportunities because we're too much worried about, how it's breaking stuff.
Right. And you, Brian?
I would say build cool stuff. Sounds a bit silly, but if there's something that you think this is amazing, this is neat, I really want this to exist in the world, other people are going to think that as well. And obviously, it's got to be a force for good. You have to be safe. You have to make sure you're doing the right things. But ultimately, if you're not interested in it, no one else is going to be.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Now, my silly question, to AI or not to AI?
Yeah, I'm obviously it's a little obvious. I guess we're very much leaning into AI, but I do. I mean, the one thing I'll say there is we've worked with educators, and for example, the school system is very challenged because a lot of boards think there needs to be AI in every classroom. We need to teach students how to use AI because it's part of their future. And yet there's a lot of teachers that really don't want to have anything to do with AI. And they see the negatives of AI and they wish it didn't exist and they want it kept outside of the classroom. And so that's a tension, in that question. There's a real tension. And one of the things I say with boards is to get from the fear perspective to the opportunity perspective, you really need wonder, which is kind of what Brian is talking about. Like to spend some times, with that, take a picture, what's in your fridge, what kind of dinner could you make from that? What, showing teachers some of the fun little things you can do with AI, but getting to them point going, oh, wait, that's cool. Like once you get them to that point of that's kind of cool. And how do you think this could, then you're starting to get that opportunity mindset opened up. And so I think, that's a critical step to get if we want to transform systems. We have to get more people looking to the opportunity and less at the fear side. So yeah, to AI.
Yeah.
I would say it's a little bit like asking, 20 years ago, to internet or not to internet. There were people going, no, this is just a fad, or people saying, no, we need to keep this away from education or keep these away. And that's not to say the internet has been, an unalloyed good for society. It's had a lot of negative consequences. But this is a movement that is not going away. And so rather than trying to fight it and trying to figure out how to, stop it from happening, you have to accept this is going to come. This is going to impact every area of our society. So let's figure out both how to mitigate the problems, but also how to leverage this possibility to do interesting and neat things in the world.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking this question is also because I didn't feel like that 20 years ago. I never had any issues with the internet. I love the internet. I embraced it. And I felt very differently when AI came in. Even though I was an AI product manager, I built AI product, but maybe when Gen AI came in.
Yeah.
So maybe it's my age, maybe it's what I've seen, maybe it's what I'm seeing other people are doing with it. I kind of like, unlike you, Brian, I think it's a bit different, but I know that we cannot bring that genie back into the bottle. There is no way.
So I would say with that, one of the lessons we learned from the internet was there wasn't a lot of people saying no. It was sort of this, all the tech people were saying yes, everyone was saying this is great. We sort of went maybe too hard into it as a society, and we're now seeing some of the repercussions. So if anything, I feel like there's a swing back in the other direction, right? People are saying, well, internet and social media and phones have caused all these problems. So we're so worried about the problems, but they've lost sight of, but it brought a lot of amazing opportunities too.
True.
So it needs to strike a balance.
Absolutely. Proudest moment?
For me, seeing Artie in the zoo. So the Toronto Zoo has built us. It looks like an old school arcade cabinet. I don't know if you can do pictures in here. This old school arcade cabinet of Artie, the AI zookeeper, in the otter exhibit. And I remember the first time they sent us a picture of it in the room, in space, actually with the otters. That was a special feeling.
Please send me those pictures. I will send them to our producers and we'll add them to the video because that will be very cool to see.
Yeah. And I think for me, I mean, we mentioned this a little bit. I have this perverse desire to teach very large classes, and we are talking like 17, 1800 students. And partly that becomes out of my musical background where I like lots of people always. But then the trick is always, how do you teach them well? And of course, one of the worries is they can't get much access to you. And when we sort of had virtual Steve out there, I was getting emails saying, this is a game changer. I feel like I now have somebody I can study with, someone I can ask. And remember, there's a lot of social anxiety, so they have trouble doing that with the person next to them. And so I think that was a feeling like, wow, I had people that were impressed enough to reach out to me and say, thank you for adding this to the course. This is really helping me show what I can do. So I think on this journey, that made me feel pretty good.
That's great. That's a great feeling, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then last question, next goal.
You want to go first, Brian?
So I don't know if it's next goal, but I think the getting it just in front of more people in an easier way. We talked earlier about our real problem right now is each new situation, each new user, each new opportunity is a big spin up at the moment, or it's becoming less, but you have to sort of reinvent pieces every time. And I think I would love to get to the point where someone wants one of these, and that's part of what the parallel system is for. They can jump in within 15, 20 minutes. Steve gave an example of this the other day where during a talk in the background, we created one and it was ready to go. And this sort of almost self-serve option, because I think that suddenly takes us away from being the bottleneck. That is my next, I think, big goal we'd like to work towards.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and I think what I would add, just as the use case that fuels a lot of us, and I joked about the multiple choice testing, but it is, we really love the idea of doing oral assessments at scale. We really believe that we can allow every student to really show what they learn, but not only that, I'm a firm believer that assessment drives education, that the way we assess learning shapes the way that learning happens, that teachers naturally teach to the test. It's a normal thing to do. It's an appropriate thing to do. Everybody's evaluated by how well those students do on the test. If the test is good, if it's really capturing what we want in that, with the richness and with the equity and with the holisticness that we want, by making assessment better, we can make everything better. And so that's the use case I think we're chasing. It's a complex use case. There's a lot of things we have to show through research that we've got rightfully, because it's a big thing that we do in society. But that's the gold ring, I guess, that you'd say that we're sort of chasing. And I think we're going to get there.
Great. I'm sure you will. Anything else you guys would like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
I mean, if there's any investors that aren't sure what to do with money, we're a good bet. No, aside for that, I don't know. I mean, we love talking to people who find AI fascinating and interesting. We've gotten where we are largely because I think Brian and I are both very social people who connect with a lot of people and chat with them, and just so we always find that enjoyable, and it almost always leads to some opportunity at some point down the road for them, for us. And so if people are interested, if they want to reach out, we're both on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with you. Happy to have some chats.
And I'd say for me, we now have the first version of our self-service available. So if you go to talklab.ca, you can go right now and make yourself a parallel, play with all the features and figure it out. And if that's something that is of interest to you, contact us and we'll figure out how to make it happen. But even if it's not, just for playing around, it's kind of fun to play with.
Yeah, it is amazing. Thank you so much, Steve and Brian. I really enjoyed our talk.
Thank you, Moshe.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, everyone, for watching us or listening to us today. My name is Moshe Mikanovsky, and I'm your host on the I'm your host on the Beyond Product podcast. Please come again, watch us again, share it with your friends. And also, we always love feedback, so tell us what you think. We'll see you next time.